Okay, avoiding the interdisciplinary wanderlust or don't step in the activity trap. When you're doing an interdisciplinary unit or a thematic unit, it's really easy to kind of go down a wrong road right away. And so let's take an example. And this is a group came up with this idea, and they had this great idea to do a unit around the idea of a potato. Now, and then from that, they started to spin all kinds of ideas. Well, we could do this science lab where we do electricity with the potato. And then we could talk about the potato famine in Ireland. And then we could talk about gardening and growing potatoes. And we could do some art with potatoes. I'm not sure what that would be. But they had an idea, and it was a pretty cool one, actually. So they had all these ideas. But they were having a hard time figuring out what brings it all together. And what we decided, and they had a great math idea, and unfortunately I can't remember what it was, but man, it was a cool idea. But these are all great activities. They were all really fun activities. But in their planning, they they weren't connecting any dots. They were just having dots. All they had were dots, but nothing was connected. And as we talked, we realized that there was no theme. There was no there. They just had this idea, this potato, and they disparately thought of all these great activities that they could do, and they were all fun activities, and I'm sure kids would have fun doing them. But in the end, I suspect they wouldn't remember the science that they did. They would just remember doing the lab. They wouldn't remember much about the potato famine. They would just remember, oh, we did something with potatoes. And what would be missing is that theme. And they didn't have a theme. They didn't have a thematic question. They just had a topic idea that they could build a bunch of lessons around. But there was no theme. And so as we brainstormed, we realized, and they were struggling, and we're trying to figure out why they were struggling. And what we realized is there was no thematic question. And without the thematic question, they didn't have any guiding questions. And so think back to pedagogy, or think about what Knight says in pedagogy, and he talks about the activity trap. They fell into the activity trap, or they had interdisciplinary wanderlust. And it's very common to think of these great activities we can do around the idea of a potato. But without a connection, meaning without a theme, then they can't come up with any real good guiding questions. And now it's just random activities again, though they're all a week's worth of activities about the potato. But that's not a thematic unit. It's interdisciplinary to a point, but it's not thematic. So what we end up with is a real thin interdisciplinary unit. It's not real meaningful, actually. And so after we talked for a while, they were a little heartbroken. It's like, oh, but they had great stuff. So then we just had to process a little bit, and we realized they did have a theme. It was really humans and the potato. That was their theme. They were looking at really human history through the eyes of the potato. So now they had a theme. So now they had to think about a good thematic question. Maybe as simple as, what if there were no potatoes? How would our history be different? And then you could talk about the science of growing the potatoes and selective breeding. So, you could have a guiding question. How have humans influenced the evolution of the potato? Now we have a question to answer. How is the potato responsible for Irish immigrants in the 1800s in the United States? So now we have a theme. We have a reason to learn these things. And that was the piece that was missing. So when designing a thematic unit, you have to use questions because the questions help you prioritize and focus in. And what they would find is, well, maybe that electricity science lab, while fun, doesn't really help us understand this bigger question about humans' history and the potatoes' history and how those two intersect with each other. So that one doesn't apply. So they had a bunch of dots, but they weren't connecting the dots. You have to connect the dots. And by doing a thematic, inquiry-based, interdisciplinary unit, you help the students then connect the dots. And if there isn't a connection to be made, then you realize that, oh, that dot doesn't belong in here. And it helps you prioritize your lesson planning and your unit planning. And with everything now having a bigger purpose and a bigger picture, you are developing students' holistic thinking, critical thinking, and problem solving skills, and it will be more memorable and maybe even fun. Perish the thought that school might be memorable and fun.